Hi, this is CJ with Cycletron. On Saturday, a few days ago, I released a video about how I thought Harley Davidson stock was poised to make some big gains. The idea was that the second quarter earnings report was going to be much better than a lot of people expected because power sports sales in general in the United States during the COVID period, if you will, has been at historic highs. Boy, was I wrong. Harley Davidson stock dropped about 10% today with disappointing earnings, basically loss of revenue that was well below expectations. The stock managed to close near its open around $29 a share, but I am more concerned about the long-term viability of Harley Davidson as a company. I love their motorcycles. I own a 2019 Street Glide Special. It's a fantastic motorcycle. But the company itself is kind of all over the map in terms of leadership and really what their future may hold. I mean, I'm pretty much near the demographic of the typical Harley rider. Average Harley rider, I think, now is in their late 50s, and that group is getting older year by year for the most part. Unfortunately, some of those folks are dying off, or they decide they can't really handle an 800-pound motorcycle as well as they'd like to, so they're getting out of motorcycling altogether. And those folks that are leaving the industry aren't being replaced by younger riders to a large extent. I mean, a big part of that is the cost of entry for a Harley Davidson motorcycle. Most of the touring bikes are between $20,000 and $30,000. That's excluding the CVO models. The Dynas typically are $14,000 to $18,000. The 500 Street or 750 Street, those bikes are made in India. Just people I know who've ridden them, mostly in the MSF sanctioned riding courses that Harley Davidson has at various dealerships. It's a good riding class, but they put them on the 500 Street. My own son took a class on that 500 Street, and he didn't like the bike at all. He said the tank was too wide. It was just a lot of odd things about the bike. It just didn't appeal to him at all in terms of even riding it, let alone owning it. So let's contrast that with Polaris Industries, the brand that owns Indian Motorcycle, that produces Indian motorcycles, the Slingshot. They produce boats, snowmobiles. There are much more, as of course the Razor, the side-by-sides. They're a lot more diverse power sport company, and their sales were up about 57% this quarter compared to the previous year's quarter, and their stock jumped about 10% today, and Harley dropped about 10% and then later recovered to be more or less flat for the day. So I'm not emphasizing this just to show what an individual stock is doing or between two stocks on a given day. I'm looking at this as sort of an indicator of the power sport industry in general and how Harley Davidson may fit into that. I mean, if you look at Harley Davidson is a much bigger company, obviously, than Polaris, but Polaris has a much more diversified product portfolio, as it were. Harley Davidson doesn't have any off-road motorcycles right now. They are supposed to be coming out with the adventure touring bike next year, but as it stands right now in 2020, there's no dirt bikes, no off-road bikes, no side-by-sides. They're much more limited in terms of what they offer for a power sport vehicle. The other issue I've had from personal experience with Harley Davidson is a poor dealership experience in some cases. I've met Harley dealers that are great to work with. Those typically are in smaller markets. The dealerships in the larger markets that I've visited, in my experience, have been extremely aggressive in terms of how they approach their sales methods. The good thing about going into a Harley dealership, it's usually quite easy to get a test ride. They openly invite people to test ride their motorcycles. That's a plus. But if you sit down to start talking numbers, that's when my experience has gone south at some of these larger metropolitan dealerships. about a year or so ago, before I bought my 2019 Street Glide, I was looking at a leftover 2018 Street Glide, a bike that should have gone for around $27,000 full price, and I was pretty even on the trade. And they were doing what's called the 4-square close, which is kind of like a 3-card Monte. They try and confuse you with different blocks on a piece of paper, how much the price of the new bike is going to be, and what your trade is, and what your down payment's going to be. And then the last block is a payment period with so much per month payment, and then they'll typically ask you to initial that there. They'll put a line saying, hey, does that sound great? They did that to me on this $26,000 motorcycle, and it's like, okay, $26,000 for your bike, that's pretty good. And they were offering me pretty close to what I owed for my trade-in, so there was no additional money there. And the other thing, they like to add a lot of documentation fees, freight and setup, so that was added to the price of the bike in the first block. And then they wanted me to put down like $5,000, and at the end, the monthly payment is $580 or something like that, for 72 months. When I added the down payment to the total monthly payment and the monthly amounts, it came out to $43,000. If I'd been dumb enough to sign into the payment block, I would have walked out with a $43,000 commitment for a $26,000 motorcycle. And that happened to me, somebody with over 30 years experience buying vehicles, and including motorcycles. So that's not exactly an inviting environment for, say, some guy or gal in their early 20s maybe looking to buy their first bike, and may get steamrolled by an aggressive 4-square closing sales tactic. When I called them on it, they basically said, we got to start somewhere, and that's how we do it with everybody. I mean, it was, I couldn't get out of that place fast enough. And again, I've had varying degrees of experience at different dealerships, Harley and non-Harley, but I'd say that was one of the worst ones that I've had. And so I just don't know collectively, how a company could let a franchisee operate like that. It seems that it's not good for the brand, and it's got to be turning off potential customers. It certainly turned me off. It didn't turn me off on the brand. It just turned me off on that dealership. But other people may just get turned off on Harley Davidson as a brand and never come back. So I just think right now the future's a little dim. I hate to say it. I hope Harley stays in business for a long time, but I still have my Street Glide. I might buy other Harleys in the future, but they keep pushing the premium pricing. My Street Glide, when I bought it, I had to make some upgrades that I thought were absolutely necessary. They weren't even just preferences. At my age, it's harder for me to see at night. I thought the stock headlights were rather dim, so I had to spend money upgrading to LED headlights and turn signals. Also, I didn't think the suspension, the rear shock was that great, and so I spent $1,000 upgrading the rear suspension. The bike operates much better now with an aftermarket shock on it. But again, you got to ask yourself, if you're spending $28,000 for a top-of-the-line touring motorcycle, why do you got to spend another $2,000 just for essentially things that may come stock on a competitor's bike, or things that should come stock on a modern bike in general? I mean, a lot of competing brands manage to sell bikes at a far lower price point with decent suspension and LED lighting. Harley a year or so ago took a few things off their Street Glide. I mean, they took the heel shifter off. That's been on for years. I mean, just little minor cost-saving things. But again, if you're spending that kind of money on a touring bike, it's ticky-tack. So, no matter what I think about Harley Davidson, and again, comparing their stock chart versus a smaller company, but both in the power sports industry, it's quite a tale. I mean, you take Harley, that's been around since 1903, and they're really struggling. I hope they can pull out of it, but They've got a lot of debt. Their sales are going down quarter by quarter. The 2020 inventory's pretty much gone and won't be replicated. So new models won't come out until January of 2021. So having said all that, I wish him well. I am out of my positions with Harley right now as a stockholder, and I didn't buy Polaris either. I thought about it, and just from a short-term trading standpoint, I would have been money ahead. I actually lost money on my Harley trade because I was anecdotally thinking with all the low inventory that they were going to have a better second quarter than most people thought, and it turned out to be worse than most people thought. So, well, I will end on that note. I have more videos coming, so please stay tuned. Drop me some comments down below, and we'll see you soon.